I was 23 when I discovered that my entire existence was a joke to the two people who were supposed to love me most. The revelation didn't come as a thunderbolt or a dramatic confession. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in the casual cruelty of overheard laughter. I'd come home early from my job at the bookstore, my shift cut short due to a power outage. The old Victorian house my parents owned sat on Maple Street, a place I'd grown up in but never quite felt belonged to me. As I pushed open the front door, I heard voices drifting from the sunroom, my mother's high-pitched giggle and my father's baritone chuckle, the kind of laughter that comes easy after too much wine. "I still can't believe we went through with it," my mother was saying. 23 years of pretending." I froze in the hallway, my hand still on the doorknob. "Best decision we ever made, considering the alternative." My father replied, "There was a clink of glasses. Here's to our little accident that paid off." My mother's laughter tinkled again. "Don't call her that, Robert." According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Although, I suppose that's exactly what she was. God, if we'd known how much she'd complicate our lives. But look at us now. The house is almost paid off thanks to that trust fund stipulation. Another 2 years and we're free. My breath caught in my throat. Trust fund? What trust fund? I sometimes wonder if she suspects, my mother mused. About her real parents, I mean. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the wall for support, my messenger bag sliding off my shoulder and hitting the floor with a soft thud. The conversation stopped abruptly. Footsteps approached. My father appeared in the hallway, his face flushing red when he saw me standing there, pale and trembling. "Lily," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I didn't hear you come in." My mother emerged behind him, her expression flickering between guilt and annoyance before settling on a tight smile. "Sweetheart, how long have you been standing there?" I found my voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. "Long enough. What did you mean about my real parents?" They exchanged a glance, and in that moment of silent communication, I saw the truth written across their faces. These people who'd raised me, who'd attended my school plays and taught me to ride a bike, were strangers wearing parent-shaped masks. My father sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "You might as well sit down. We should have had this conversation years ago." But I didn't want to sit. I stood there in the hallway of a house that suddenly felt like a museum of lies while they told me the truth with all the emotion of reading a grocery list. I was adopted, yes, but not in the way most people think of adoption. Not chosen with love, not wanted desperately by parents who couldn't have children of their own. My biological mother had been my father's younger sister, Catherine, a woman I'd never met because she died when I was 6 months old. Catherine had gotten pregnant at 17, and the family had been scandalized. My grandparents, wealthy and image-obsessed, had made a deal with my father and his wife. Take the baby, raise her until she turned 25, and they'd inherit a substantial trust fund along with the family house. "It was business," my father said flatly. "Your grandparents wanted to protect the family reputation, and we needed the financial security. You got a home. Everyone won." "Except you never told me," I said, my voice breaking. "You let me believe you were my real parents. You let me love you." My mother, the woman I'd called Mom for 23 years, waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be dramatic, Lily. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. What more did you want? What more did I want?" The question hung in the air, so absurd it was almost laughable. I wanted them to have loved me. I wanted to have been more than a business transaction, more than a means to an end. "The trust fund," I said slowly. "It's mine, isn't it?" That's what the stipulation was about. My father's jaw tightened. "The inheritance is complicated. Your grandparents left provisions, but much of it was designated for your care and housing until you turned 25. We've been managing it responsibly." "Managing it," I repeated, the pieces clicking into place. "You mean spending it on this house, on your lifestyle, using money that was meant for me. We raised you," my mother snapped, her facade of civility cracking. "Do you have any idea how much you've cost us over the years? The trust fund barely covers it." I looked at these people, these strangers, and felt something inside me break and remake itself into something harder, clearer. "I want to see the documentation. all of it, the trust, the adoption papers, everything. You're not entitled, my father began. I'm entitled to the truth. I cut him off, surprised by the steel in my own voice. And I'm entitled to what my biological mother left me. I'll be speaking with a lawyer. My mother laughed, actually laughed. A lawyer? With what money, sweetheart? You make minimum wage shelving books. Do you really think you can take us on? She was right, of course. I had almost nothing in my savings, no resources to fight them. But I also had nothing left to lose. I moved out that night, throwing my belongings into garbage bags and crashing on my best friend Maya's couch. She held me while I cried, rage and grief pouring out in equal measure. But even through the tears, I made myself a promise. I would find out the truth, and I would claim what was rightfully mine, not for revenge. I wasn't interested in destroying them. I just wanted justice. I wanted what my biological mother had intended for me. The next morning, I called in sick to work and started making calls. It took 6 law offices before I found someone willing to hear my case. A sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in trust and estate law. She agreed to a consultation, and when I explained my situation, her expression grew progressively grimmer. Without seeing the documents, I can't say for certain, she said, but if what you're telling me is accurate, there may have been significant mismanagement of the trust, possibly even fraud. I don't have money for legal fees, I admitted. She studied me for a long moment. Let me look into this. If there's a case here, we can work on contingency. I don't like people who exploit vulnerable children, even if those children are grown now. Over the following weeks, Patricia worked magic. She obtained court orders, subpoenaed bank records, and uncovered a paper trail that painted a damning picture. The trust my grandparents had established hadn't been modest. It had been substantial, worth nearly $2 million, meant to provide for my education, living expenses, and future. My parents had been designated as trustees with strict guidelines on how the money could be spent. They'd violated nearly every provision. The Victorian house, purchased with trust funds that should have been preserved for my inheritance. The European vacations they'd taken every summer while I'd stayed home with babysitters, charged to the trust. My father's luxury car, my mother's jewelry collection, the country club membership, all of it paid for with money meant for me. They were supposed to provide accounting annually to an oversight board, Patricia explained, spreading documents across her desk. But your grandfather's lawyer retired, the oversight lapsed, and your parents simply continued spending. By my calculations, there's less than $400,000 left of your trust. I felt sick. $1.6 million, gone, spent on a lifestyle I'd never even benefited from while I'd worked part-time jobs through high school and taken out student loans for community college because they'd told me we couldn't afford university. What happens now, I asked. Now we file suit for breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of assets, and fraud. This is going to get ugly, Lily. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my mother's dismissive laughter, my father's cold calculation. I thought about every birthday where they'd given me token gifts while buying themselves everything they desired. I thought about the lonely little girl I'd been, always sensing something was wrong, but never understanding what. Yes, I said, I'm ready. The lawsuit hit them like a hurricane. Within days, their accounts were frozen pending investigation. My father showed up at Maya's apartment, his face red with fury, demanding I drop the charges. You're destroying this family, he shouted through the door. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us? I didn't answer. I'd said everything I needed to say through my lawyer. What I didn't do was go to the press. I didn't post about it on social media or try to turn public opinion against them. This wasn't about humiliation or revenge. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen and getting answers about who I really was, about the mother I'd never known. Patricia helped me access Catherine's personal effects, which my grandparents had kept in storage. There were journals, photographs, letters. I spent hours reading my biological mother's words, and through them, I began to understand the girl she'd been. Artistic, sensitive, trapped in a family that valued appearance over authenticity. She'd written about her pregnancy, about her fear and hope, about wanting her daughter to have everything she'd never had: freedom, love, choice. I hope she'll be stronger than me, Catherine had written in her last journal entry, dated 2 weeks before she died in a car accident. I hope she'll know her own worth and never let anyone diminish it. I've set up the trust to give her security, to give her options I never had. My brother promises he'll love her like his own. I have to believe that's true. I cried reading those words, mourning the mother I'd never known and the love she'd wanted me to have. My father had promised her. He'd looked his dying sister in the eye and promised to love me. And then he'd spent 2 decades treating me like an inconvenient investment. The trial took 8 months. During that time, I watched my parents' world slowly unravel. Their friends began distancing themselves as word spread about the lawsuit. The country club membership they'd valued so highly was quietly revoked when their dues went unpaid. My mother, who'd built her identity on social standing and material possessions, began to look haggard and desperate. My father tried different tactics. First anger, then attempted reconciliation, finally bargaining. He showed up at the bookstore where I worked, waiting until my shift ended. "We can settle this," he said, following me to my car. "We'll give you what's left of the trust. Just drop the suit." "This isn't about the money," I told him quietly. "This is about the truth, about accountability." "I gave you a home," he insisted. "I kept my promise to Catherine." "You gave me a roof and food," I corrected. "That's not the same as a home, and you broke your promise every single day you treated me like a burden instead of a daughter." He flinched, and for just a moment, I saw something like shame cross his face. But then it hardened back into resentment. "You'll regret this. Even if you win, you'll regret tearing this family apart." But I didn't regret it. Even on the hardest days, when I questioned everything, I knew I was doing the right thing. The karma I'd unconsciously waited for didn't arrive as a single dramatic blow. It came in increments, in natural consequence that needed no orchestration from me. The IRS, alerted by the civil case, launched their own investigation into my parents' tax returns. Apparently, they'd been claiming me as a dependent and taking education credits for tuition they'd never paid, using my student loan disbursements to fund their lifestyle while I'd struggled with debt. Tax fraud charges were filed. Then my father's employer, a prestigious investment firm that valued reputation above all, placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. The loss of income meant they could no longer maintain the mortgage on the Victorian house, the house bought with my trust fund. My mother's sister, who I'd grown up calling Aunt Linda, reached out to me. Over coffee, she tearfully apologized for not speaking up sooner. "I always knew something was wrong," she admitted. "The way they talked about you, the way they seemed to resent your presence. But I told myself it wasn't my business. I should have said something. I should have protected you." Her testimony became crucial to the case. She provided evidence of conversations where my parents had openly discussed using the trust fund for personal expenses, laughing about how easy it was to justify any purchase as being for Lily's benefit. The civil trial finally came. I sat in the courtroom, Maya beside me holding my hand, and watched as Patricia systematically destroyed my parents' defense. Bank records, testimony, my mother's own emails discussing which furniture to buy for our house, using the girls' money. It all painted an undeniable picture of betrayal and theft. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found in my favor on all counts. The judgment ordered my parents to repay the misappropriated funds with interest, nearly $2 million, and awarded me additional damages for emotional distress. The judge's rebuke from the bench was scathing. "You were entrusted with a sacred duty," she said, looking directly at my father. "A dying young woman placed her child in your care, believing you would honor her wishes and provide love and security. Instead, you exploited that child for financial gain while providing only the bare minimum required by law. Your actions represent not just a breach of fiduciary duty, but a profound moral failure." My mother began to cry, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity, of rage at being caught and held accountable. The criminal tax case proceeded separately, and 6 months later, both my parents were convicted of tax fraud. My father received 18 months in federal prison and 3 years probation. My mother received 12 months in probation. Both were ordered to pay substantial fines and restitution. The Victorian house went into foreclosure. I watched from across the street as movers emptied it. my parents supervising with the hollow-eyed expressions of people whose carefully constructed lives had collapsed. My mother saw me standing there, and for a moment, our eyes met. I saw her open her mouth, perhaps to hurl one final accusation, one last attempt to make me the villain in their story. But I simply turned and walked away. There was nothing left to say. I didn't attend their sentencing hearing. I'd spent enough of my life in rooms where they controlled the narrative. This chapter was closed. The trust fund, what remained of it plus the court-ordered repayment, took time to fully recover. My parents declared bankruptcy, which complicated the restitution. But Patricia was relentless. And over the next 2 years, through asset seizures and payment plans, I recovered most of what had been stolen. More importantly, I recovered myself. I used part of the money to finish my degree, studying library science at a university I'd once thought was impossible to afford. I found a small apartment filled with light, decorated it with plants and books and things that made me happy. I began therapy, working through the complex grief of losing parents who'd never really been parents, of mourning a mother I'd never known but felt connected to through her words. Maya stood beside me through all of it, reminding me on the hard days that seeking justice wasn't the same as seeking revenge, that holding people accountable for their actions wasn't cruel, it was necessary. 3 years after that Tuesday afternoon, when my world had shattered, I received a letter. It was from my father, written from the halfway house, where he was completing his sentence. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain. "Lily," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand now what I destroyed. Not just the money, that seems almost insignificant now, but the chance to know an extraordinary young woman. My sister would be ashamed of me, and rightfully so. You were never the accident we joked about. You were a gift we were too selfish and stupid to appreciate. I hope you find the happiness that Catherine wanted for you. I hope you become everything she dreamed you could be." I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation or excuses, but there was none, just raw regret and the acknowledgement that came too late to change anything, but perhaps not too late to matter. I didn't write back. Maybe someday I would, but I wasn't ready. The wound was still too fresh, and I had no obligation to make him feel better about what he'd done. Instead, I focused on building a life that would have made Catherine proud. I volunteered at a youth center, mentoring kids in foster care, knowing too well what it felt like to grow up feeling unwanted. I established a small scholarship fund in my mother's name for students aging out of the foster system. I let myself love and be loved, learning to trust again slowly, carefully. On what would have been Catherine's 45th birthday, I visited her grave for the first time. It was in a quiet cemetery on the edge of town, the headstone simple: Catherine Marie Harrison, beloved daughter, gone too soon. I placed flowers there, wild flowers, because her journals had mentioned how she loved them, and I spoke to her for the first time. "I don't know if you can hear me," I said softly, "but I want you to know that I'm okay, more than okay. I found your journals, read your words. I know you wanted me to be strong and free and happy. I'm working on all of those things. Your brother didn't keep his promise to you, but I'm going to keep it for him. I'm going to live the life you wanted for me. I'm going to make something beautiful out of what you gave me." The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, and I chose to believe it was her answer. I never sought revenge against my parents. I never tried to publicly shame them or destroy them beyond what their own actions had accomplished. I simply refused to be silent about the truth. I refused to protect them from the natural consequences of their choice, and in doing that, in standing up for myself and for the little girl I'd been, I found something more valuable than vengeance. I found peace. Karma hadn't required my intervention. It had simply been the universe's way of restoring balance, of ensuring that truth and justice eventually prevailed. My parents had laughed off their accident, had treated me as nothing more than a financial opportunity, but life has a way of teaching hard lessons to those who exploit the vulnerable, who break sacred trusts, who choose cruelty over compassion. They'd lost everything: their money, their freedom, their reputation, their friends. But more than that, they'd lost the chance to know the person I'd become. They'd lost the opportunity to be part of something meaningful, to experience the kind of love Catherine had wanted for me and for them. As for me, I'd lost the fantasy of the parents I'd wished I had, but I'd gained something far more valuable: the truth about who I was, the knowledge of a mother who loved me enough to try to provide for my future, and the strength that comes from surviving betrayal and choosing to thrive anyway. 5 years after that overheard conversation, I stood in my own small house, purchased with my own money, filled with my own choices, and looked at the photograph of Catherine I'd framed and hung in the hallway. She was 17 in the picture, laughing at something off camera, her hand resting on her barely visible pregnant belly. "We made it," I whispered to her image. "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in my life, I knew without a doubt that it was true. Justice had been served, not through my anger or desire for retribution, but through the simple, inexorable force of truth revealing itself and the world responding accordingly. My parents had laughed off their accident, treating karma as if it were a joke they were too clever to fall for, but karma had the last laugh after all. Not because I'd orchestrated it, but because I'd simply stepped aside and let the truth do what truth always does eventually. It wins.